Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good evening. First, I want to take the time to thank you very much for your attention and your devotion to paying attention to the evidence presented here in this trial. Now, as my colleague promised, and as the evidence has shown, this case is really about cheating. It's about a small business owner with a failing business who did everything he could to turn his business around. But despite that, his business failed. Instead of accepting responsibility for this, he decided to cheat. He decided to take the easy way out. He decided to burn down his own company and defraud his insurance company. Now, during this trial, you've seen testimony presented by Ms. Sonia Peterson, who told you directly on the stand that she, Mr. Jackson, and Mr. Avery conspired to commit arson. You've seen testimony by Chief Fire Marshal Olson, who, after conducting a thorough investigation, determined that the cause of fire was not an accident, that the cause of fire had to be intentional. You've heard from Mr. Anderson, the banker, that Mr. Jackson owed First Trust Bank $400,000. He was personally liable for this money. He owed the bank $400,000 due on November 28, 2011, just 2 weeks after the fire at Flinders. And finally, you've heard testimony from Ms. Williams, who outlined in great detail the failure of Flinders Aluminum, who outlined in great detail that by 2010, the market for their product had fallen through, and in 2010, they had lost $500,000, and they lost another $500,000 in 2011. Now, what is all of this testimony? What is it pointing to? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is pointing to commercial arson. Now, back in 2000, Mr. Jackson purchased Flinders, and for a while, everything went fine. In 2002, he purchased fire insurance. In 2002 as well, he hired Ms. Williams. In 2006, Mr. Jackson took out his $400,000 loan from the bank, knowing that it would be due in full on November 28, 2011. He also began an affair with Ms. Williams. However, by 2010, as you've seen, the market for his product collapsed, and his entire company was failing. What did he do? He went looking for a way to turn around his business. He went and hired Ms. Sonia Peterson. Now, after a few months, sometime in September 2011, he had an affair with Ms. Peterson. And in that same month, Ms. Peterson and Mr. Jackson came up with the idea that they just couldn't turn the business around. And that's when they decided the only way out of this current situation, the only way out of their financial difficulty, would be to burn down the factory for the insurance money. Now, in 2011, again, in September 2011, Ms. Peterson knew a Mr. Avery and introduced Mr. Avery to Mr. Jackson. That was the final piece in this puzzle. Mr. Jackson, didn't have the arson experience that Mr. Avery did. Mr. Avery had been connected with 2 previous fires and was known to Ms. Peterson as an arsonist. Together, all 3 of them devised a plan to burn down the Flinders factory, making it look like an accident in order to collect the insurance company from their Mismo fire insurance policy. Now, let me turn to the count of commercial arson. Now, a person commits the crime of commercial arson if the person, through an agent, intentionally, let me focus you on the word intentionally or willfully damages by fire, explosion, a building or structure. And the second element, commercial arson, is going to be for the purpose of making a false insurance claim. The important part's in bold. That would benefit the person or the entity owned by the person. Now, first, the fire was set intentionally. The evidence is very clear. As you've seen, Sonia Peterson herself stood up there and gave direct testimony that Mr. Jackson and Mr. Avery conspired to burn down the building. Second, Chief Olson concluded that the amount of hydrochloric acid caused by the type of fire caused by unusual ventilation circumstances not normally found in the building, as well as the presence of Avery at the site where the fire started, all points to the fact that this fire was set intentionally. And finally, George Avery was connected with two other fires. He had the experience to set this one. However, unfortunately, he did end up passing away. Now, second, the fire was started to make a for the purpose of making a false insurance claim. Now, the three things I want to point out to you here. Jackson was personally liable for $400,000 due on November 28, 2011. Second, Flinders was a financial mess. They were hemorrhaging cash. Third, the amount of fire insurance that the Flinders company had was increased just 6 weeks prior to the fire. Now, the defense is going to tell you that the state's argument is circumstantial. They're going to tell you that there is not enough evidence here for you to convict, because there's not enough evidence here to convict beyond a reasonable doubt. However, there is, because the totality of the circumstances in this case are so overwhelmingly point to this being commercial arson that I know you will do the right thing and not discount it. Let me walk you through 6 facts I'd like you to take into consideration when you are making your deliberations. First, you've heard Miss Sonia Peterson herself tell you that there was a conspiracy to commit arson, and that arson did in fact occur. Number 2, Chief Fire Investigator Olson, a highly respected professional in his field, has ruled out accidental causes of the fire. Third, Mr. Avery worked at 2 other plants that hired him and then shortly after burned to the ground, accidentally. This is highly suspect. Fourth, Mr. Jackson was in very dire financial straits. He was personally liable for $400,000 due on November 28, 2011, and there was no way for him to make that payment. Number 5, the Flinders company itself was hemorrhaging money, and there was no turnaround in sight. And finally, 6, Mr. Jackson increased the amount of his fire insurance just 6 weeks prior to the fire. Taken together in the totality of the circumstances, all of this points to Mr. Jackson trying to cheat the system for his own financial gain. Now, let me tell you, Arthur Jackson acted recklessly. He's not a great guy. He is not the unfortunate, poor, small businessman that the defense wants you to think he is. He managed his business into the ground. He took debts he couldn't repay. He decided to burn down his own factory. Over 25 people that used to work for Flinders are now unemployed. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case should stand out in your mind. The totality of the circumstances that I've just presented to you point directly to the fact that this was no accidental fire. This was an intentional act. This was an intentional act by Mr. Jackson. This was an intentional act of arson. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I ask that you do the right thing. Don't let Mr. Jackson get away with this horrible crime. Find him guilty of commercial arson. Thank you very much.